In this video, we're going to show you how to install an all-over Modello stencil to create a custom wallpaper effect on a feature wall. Our all-over patterns come in sections or tiles. Each section contains the exact same pattern repeat, so that when you butt the patterns together on your surface, top and bottom, side to side, they work together to create a seamless all-over pattern. For every Modello installation, you're going to need a few basic items. Your Modello stencil, of course, a squeegee and weeding tool, both of these are included with your orders, painter's tape, measuring tape, a bubble level, scissors or a craft knife, and a large sponge and a bucket of water. Begin every Modello stencil installation by burnishing the vinyl stencils just before you begin placing them on your wall. Lay the stencils out on a hard surface and use the squeegee to burnish both sides of the Modello stencil really well. Burnishing will ensure that the transfer tape is stuck securely to the vinyl stencil so that the backing paper comes off cleanly and easily. To make the installation on the wall even easier, pre-release the backing paper directly after burnishing the stencils. All-over pattern tiles can be quite large and more challenging to handle, so this step can make the process significantly easier. With the backing paper side up, peel back slowly and carefully halfway, watching to make sure that the vinyl pattern is not sticking to the backing paper. Then smooth it back down lightly, making sure there are no air bubbles. Then peel back the other half and smooth that back down. If you haven't burnished well enough, you may find that the vinyl will stick to the backing paper in some areas. If this happens, simply roll the backing paper back down a bit, burnish it well, and continue to slowly peel. The Modello stencil should be placed on the wall with the backing paper side down. Measure your wall for placement of your Modello stencil. Here we're placing it at the top and center of our feature wall. Use a level to make sure that the stencil is straight and secure it well with a couple of pieces of good painter's tape. Double check that it's in its proper place and then run a large piece of painter's tape across the middle of the pattern. Extend the tape out on each side enough to make sure that it will hold securely. Remove the small pieces of tape and allow the top part of the pattern to fall down. Then peel up the backing paper carefully from the stencil. Use scissors or a craft knife to cut away the backing paper. Smooth the exposed Modello stencil from the tape line up onto your surface, using the flat of your hand and a sweeping motion as you roll the stencil slowly onto the surface. Use your squeegee to burnish and secure it in place. Then remove the tape and pull the stencil up from the bottom. For a large stencil like this, you may want to peel the backing paper off in small sections at this point, rather than all at once. Continue to peel the backing paper away completely while you smooth the stencil down onto the wall. Burnish the whole stencil again with a squeegee. Remove the transfer tape on the first section that you install before moving on to the second repeat. This will help you more accurately align the next tile of the repeat pattern. Lightly moistening the transfer tape will help the adhesive release easily. Wet a large sponge and wring it out well. You don't want dripping water. Run the sponge over a small workable area of the transfer tape. You will see that the tape will begin to wrinkle and pull away from the vinyl stencil slightly. Carefully begin to peel the transfer tape from the top down. For larger Modello stencils like this, we recommend just working on one small manageable section at a time of the transfer tape. We find it's easiest to always pull the tape down towards yourself. If you see that some of the vinyl is lifting, use the flat parts of your hand to push the vinyl piece back onto the wall as you pull the transfer tape down and away. Fold or cut away the excess transfer tape as you go. Pull the transfer tape off slowly and watch to be sure that there are no smaller vinyl elements coming with it. If there are, simply burnish or push them back into place as you continue to slowly and carefully pull the transfer tape. When the transfer tape removal is complete, burnish the vinyl stencil on the wall again. For the second section of the repeat, you will need to match the pattern to the first repeat as closely as possible. To make the area that you are matching up easier to see, expose about 1 inch of it by folding back the backing paper and then cutting it away. Visually match up the pattern with the Modello stencil section that is already in place. Once you have it in place, run a large piece of painter's tape across the middle of the pattern. Double check that it is still lining up as best as possible before proceeding. Sometimes the Modello stencil can slip and shift. Once you know that it's in the right place, peel the backing paper, trim, and smooth carefully into place as before. Make sure that the pattern is lining up with the previous stencil section, and make any necessary adjustments before you fix it into place. Continue with the bottom section. And burnish it into place. Trim off excess vinyl at the floor line with a sharp craft knife and a metal straight edge. When you are approaching a side wall that will not be stenciled, we recommend that you trim off any excess pattern that you won't be using. This will make it easier to handle. Be careful not to trim more than you need though. For this repeat, fold and trim off the backing paper along the side to help you match up the pattern more easily. Repeat the vinyl stencil installation process as before. Make sure that the pattern matches up as well as possible the whole way down the seam. Sometimes you can tug and stretch the pattern a little bit to help make it match. And we'll share some troubleshooting tips at the end of this video for when the pattern doesn't match up exactly. For some repeats, you'll have to match up the pattern on 2 sides. Be sure to trim away 1 inch or so of backing paper on both edges that require pattern matching. Carefully place and match the pattern on both sides as well as possible. For large Modello stencils like this, it can be very helpful to have a second set of hands and eyes to help you. Following all the steps outlined here will give you a successful installation so that you can quickly move on to create a fabulous decorative technique. Of course, even if you're very patient and careful, sometimes things don't go as planned. But don't worry, there are very simple and easy fixes. Stay tuned for some Modello troubleshooting tips to help you install your vinyl stencils like a pro. Even if you've burnished and pre-released, you may have pointy vinyl pieces that don't release when applying your Modello stencil. This is why it's important to be patient, slow, and aware when you're peeling the backing paper off. But even if the vinyl tears a little, this is easy to fix. Roll the pattern back down and reburnish it in that area. Then continue with your installation. The vinyl material is actually very forgiving this way. When you come to an obstacle on the wall, such as a switch plate, cut the Modello stencil carefully around it as you go so that the pattern will lay flat to the wall around it. Moistening the transfer tape will make it release much easier. Just wet a small area at a time though, and then reburnish it before you start pulling. Notice that you can tear the transfer tape into small, manageable sections as you go. When pulling the transfer tape off, you may find small vinyl pieces want to come with it, particularly on lightly textured or even some types of paint surfaces. This is why it's important to proceed slowly. If this happens, just push the pattern piece down onto your surface firmly with the flats of your hands as you pull the transfer tape towards yourself. On rare occasions, our production department might miss weeding out small pattern elements. Simply pull these out yourself with your pick tool. If you have design elements that have become bunched up or folded over, carefully pull them apart and smooth them back into place. If an area of vinyl gets pulled and stretched out somehow, it's best to just slice through it and reposition it rather than trying to smooth it out and flatten any wrinkles. Cut through it with a sharp knife, lift it up on one side, and realign it with your fingers. Sometimes the vinyl can shift a little bit while cutting larger Modello stencils, potentially leaving thin slivers of vinyl here and there at the edges. Simply cut these away with a sharp craft knife before laying on the next pattern repeat. You can simply move small, loose pattern elements into place where they don't meet perfectly at the seam. And larger ones too, of course. Where you have any uneven pattern overlap, you can recut a nice smooth line in the design with a sharp craft knife. Gaps in the pattern at the seams can be easily covered with tape. Use your craft knife to cleanly cut away any excess. Go over each area of your pattern to find and address any problems before you begin. Most issues are minor and easily fixed. And you'll end up with a beautiful, seamless pattern that's ready to decorate.